You mentioned the astral realm. Could you speak a little bit more to what the astral realm is from your perspective? Because I've been out of my body a couple of times, lucid
Mhm.
dreaming, and I've felt that I've been in the astral realm, but who knows where I went. But I was in this other realm and I met all kinds of beings. It was
Mhm.
pleasant, it was not pleasant, it was heavenly like,
Yeah,
it was not heavenly like. And
yeah.
I'm curious about, what is the astral realm?
I don't know enough. I'm not an expert on this. I think it's just I mean, I think if you look at levels of vibration, the astral is still more closely tethered to what we know. It's like where we go when we dream and we're having these experiences, or where people go when they die and having other. But I understand that channeling is a spiritual skill set. You're going a little bit higher up. I'm bypassing the dead, the band of the dead relative spirit guides, and they're great. And I'm happy if they're helping. I'll take all the help I can get. Believe me, I'm not shy about that. But the guides that I get are teachers, and they come through with a specific mission. They don't care if we get the promotion at work or if the kid gets into the right school. That's our concerns. Your dead aunt on the other side may have strong opinions about that and may be very helpful, but that's not how the guides I work with operate. So I tend to, when people are opening up and they ask what to be aware of around this kind of thing, I say, beware of fear based messages, because that's often low level stuff. Um, I mean, if you get a voice saying, watch out for your neighbor, she's trying to poison you. Well, you might want to look at your tea, but be careful that you're not hearing just some low level guide trying to mess with you. And messages of flattery. You're the only person who's going to bring through this amazing thing, because flattery tends to appropriate the ego. And when the ego gets appropriated in the spiritual stuff, there's challenges. I was told by two different mediums when I was about 29, 30 years old, maybe a little older with one of them, and independently. One of them said, your real work does not kick in until you're about 48, 50 years old. And I was like, what? I was like 29, 30. What? And I was already channeling. I wasn't looking to be known for this ever, really. This just happened. And the other one said, which was really interesting, when I was about 32, she said the same thing, 48, 50 years old. And I said, why so long? And she said, you have been veiled for your own protection. And only now does that make sense to me, because who knows? My ego was invested in this in a very different way when I was younger. It was like, oh my God, I'm special. Look at me, what I can do.
Mm.
And now I don't think of this as special. I have an odd skill set that has been developed because I continued showing up for it again and again and again. I'm really consistent. The
Mm.
one thing I've done, and even when, I did this in my apartment for 18 years and people put $10 in a basket, now there are thousands of people that show up, for the online things. And it's great to do that. But really, if there were still 10 people, I would still be doing it just as I'm doing it. My job is to show up for the work, not what the work does in the world. That's not my business.
Now, could you potentially get answers to everything? Like, I'm such a curious soul. That's why I'm doing this, one of the reasons. Or are there things that are like, you can't know this?
Well, I think there are things I'm not going to be told. I don't like it when somebody says, how long is my parent going to be alive for? I don't like going there. I've done it and I've been accurate, but I'm primarily not a precog, which is a psychic skill. And it's a good psychic skill. I have a good friend who's an excellent precog, and we trade, and she wants me to do what she does. And it's like, I really don't do that. I do it differently. If it comes in, if I'm reading for somebody who's asking why they don't have a relationship, and some guy with a cactus tattooed on his bicep shows up, and I go, my God, there's a guy with a cactus on his bicep. And, within the next 6 months, I'll say it, but I'm not looking for it. It shows up. I've had people say to me years ago, ask your guides what they think about the second paragraph of the book I was reading last night on page 223. And it's like, oh, please, or translate this into Aramaic. I don't do that. Maybe somebody can. I actually had a friend, and there's some truth to this because I've tried it. Because occasionally people will ask the guides, because when I work psychically, it's a different thing. You know, when I'm channeling, I'm tuned into the station that is the guides. When I'm reading somebody, they are the station that I tune into, and I use their name and I tune into them as a coordinate. The name is a coordinate, and then I often become them. And I sometimes start to resemble them. I mean, it's quite something. I've been filmed doing this or taken on their disabilities or things like that. But if you want to know what's going on in your relationship with your husband, and I tune into you and your husband, I may be tuning into both of you back and forth, you know, and I'm like a radio, an old switchboard. I'm plugging in, and I'm hearing the messages, and I might hear what you need to be able to move the relationship forward or shift things in some positive way. It's useful work. But I have a friend who said, well, when I said, I don't know how to answer this, she said, well, ask a messenger guide. And you get like a little, like those old telegram boys, you know, running, says, what's the answer to this? And then they run off and get it. But that's not how I work. I've tried it a few times and I've been surprised. I say I don't do medical readings because I'm not a doctor and I don't want to, you know, be liable for a diagnosis that I cannot give. But I am a physical empath. And, you know, there are often times when I'm reading and, you know, and I feel pain in the breast tissue of the person that I'm tuned into. And I've learned to say, because the first time it happened, I said something and the person was angry with me. And I ran into her 2 years later after she'd had a double mastectomy. And she said, you were right. And I didn't go to the doctor when you suggested it might be a good thing to do. And you were right. And so now I'm very cautious, but because what I have realized is I'm not a medical intuitive, and assist and attunement feel fairly comparable to me. And I don't want to scare anybody, you know, and, you know, working out, you know, overextending muscle here, I can feel the pain in my armpit. So I've learned these things over time. But I don't do medical readings, and I say I don't talk to dead people. Once in a while they show up and I'm surprised because that's not my real work. But I'm good with the here and now. And other people do other things. You know, I failed math pretty much in high school. I was stoned all through math class. And science, I never liked a lot. And I've never read any of the physics that's out there, although I have students of the work that are physicists, and they love to talk about the work because they're translating it into language that they know. And I think that's fascinating. But I do know music a little bit, and the vocabulary that the guides work with is musical. And they've said the language of science will be changed in 100 years. Everything will be called something different, but music will still be as it is, and that's how they teach.
I just want to mention when you said octave a while ago, I was thinking about the law of one. They speak about that the evolution of the soul, that we're sort of in an octave, and that we're moving through the densities. And when we come to the eighth, that's like an octave. I don't know if you read that material. Probably
I
not.
haven't read any of it, no, but
Right.
that sounds right.
Yeah.
That sounds good to me. And again, I like it when other people are saying things in comparable language. I would
Yeah.
hate to be the only one.
So how do you understand, or how do the guides explain destiny and free will?
It's a big subject. I mean, you know, what I understand is we incarnate with a series of things that we hope to learn or encounter. And we will find ways to meet those things. How we do that in some ways can be up to us and have choice. I've asked this question because I've said, well, in the upper room, are we still getting our karmic lessons? And they go, yeah, you don't really, if there's something you need to learn, you're going to learn it, but you may learn it in a very different way than you might have. I can learn that it's stupid to pick up a hot pan off the stove without a potholder or a mitt. I can learn that by burning myself or by making a choice that I would likely get hurt. So there's different ways we can learn. The guides I work with do speak about free will. And they speak a lot in their work about aligning the will. So the old idea is thy will, not mine, be done, which is there's God's will and then there's my will, and there must be oddly distinct and separate and all. And my will must be bad and wrong. And I used to think that, I think early on, just from my my own other experiences that I was having. And what the guides teach is about aligning the will. They talk about the personal will as a string and divine will as a string, and that the strings are braided and become unified. And I think that's the difference between saying thy will, not mine, be done, and I am one with the source of all things, or I will to will thy will. I will to will the higher will, and align at that level. But I do get we have choice. I do think that we're going to bump into stuff that's ours to bump up against. I sometimes think that there may be, I'll give you a bad example. I lived in New York City my whole life, just about. And during COVID in 2020, I was working, channeling in Costa Rica when New York City shut down, and I couldn't get home. And I didn't know what to do. And somebody that I knew who was on Maui said, come here, and found me a tiny house and, and a plane ticket. And so I was on Maui suddenly, thinking I would be here for 2 weeks, and I never left, really. I mean, I leave to travel now, but I end up moving here. I don't know how to drive. I'm still learning. I barely know how to cook. I had everything delivered in New York, Chinese food is. So I'm living a life that I would not have imagined myself living, that in some ways is working well for me. And I'm living in a house, which oddly enough, years ago, I played that video game, The Sims. And there was one house, you used to design your own little houses and populate it with little avatars of yourself. I'm living in the house that I used to build again and again and again, 15 years ago online. It was like, oh my God, it's the house. It was my house. Did I predict it? I had a psychic friend who said, I said, am I ever going to own a home? She said, yeah, you can see the ocean. I said, I can't afford a house where you can see the ocean. She said, well, you can, because you're out of the way. And she said, I said, am I in California ocean? She said, I think maybe, because there's palm trees. And the house that I live in is on a little hill, and it looks down, as she said, a little hill. And you can see the ocean, and there's palm trees. And it's what she saw, but who knew? It was not was it fated? Maybe. Did I create it, co-create it? Maybe. Is it where I meant to be? Yes.
To watch the full video, click the link below, and I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel.